there is a new feature in Entity Framework Core 5 called query splitting. The idea of query splitting is that by default, when you issue a query to a relational database and this query needs to fetch information from other tables, it extensively uses joins in such a way that everything is fetched in a single sentence, in a single query. But sometimes we don't want this. Sometimes we may want to have several queries. Why is this? Well, for several reasons. One is that when you use too many joins, sometimes the query that Entity Framework comes up with can be slow, and thus separating that sentence into several queries can speed things up. And second, you want to avoid a Cartesian explosion. When we talk about a Cartesian explosion, we're referring to the fact that when you use many joins, you can end up with many cells in the result set. Let's see an example of this. Here we have a simple class called person that have these properties, and also it has a relationship with address, and as you can see, we have the address class here. And so there is a one-to-many relationship between person and address, and so we are configuring our application DB context here below. Here we have use SQL Server, our database. We are going to log everything into the console, and also we have the DB sets for people and addresses, and also up here we are creating our database. We are also inserting some data. We are inserting one person and 100 addresses, and then we are saving changes, and finally here we are issuing a simple query to our database. We are saying people include addresses, so we are bringing our people data and also including the addresses. So let's see what query Entity Framework writes in the console. Let me press Ctrl F5 to run our application. And here we have the console. What I want to do is to take this, I will copy this query, and I will come to Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and I will say new query in our database. I will paste this here, and as you can see, and let me put this in another line, you can see that we have a simple select, we have a from people and left join addresses on this condition and order by. And if we press F5, you are going to see that we have our data. We have the data of the person, in this case Felipe, which is the only person, and also the data of the addresses, address 1, address 73, and so on. And as you can see, there is a problem here. We have the data of the person repeated. We have age several times, we have date of birth several times, name several times, SSN several times, and so on. The only data that is different in every row is the data of the address. This means that we are wasting resources with this query. Why is that? Because we are going to transmit a lot of repeated data in this result set. Think about it. Our application is in one place and our database is in another place, so when we issue a query to our database, it is going to return a result set, right? And if that result set is bigger than it needs to be, then we are going to have to wait more to receive that data. And of course, we are going to take more time to process that data because there is so much unnecessary data in our result set that our application have to process. So what can we do about it? What we can do to avoid this Cartesian explosion is to use query splitting. Let's see that. Let me come here and I want to add a comment here. I want to say single query because this was the result of running the query in single query mode. So let me say here query splitting, because down below here we're going to add whatever Entity Framework writes in the console when we add our query splitting mode. And for that we can come here to context people and let me say here as a split query, and that's actually it. With this we are configuring this query to be splitted. Let's see what we get. Let's press Ctrl F5 and let's come here. Let's see that now what we have is two queries. So let me copy them. I'll copy the first one to here, and now the second one, let me copy it and let's paste it here. and I will run the first one first. So let me press F5, and as you can see, we can see that we have the information of Felipe, but we don't have any repeated information here, right? We only have one row. Okay, that is fine. Let's run the second query and let's see what we get. F5. Oh, and look at that. We only have the information of the address. We don't have the information of the person repeated in each row, which means that we are now being more efficient with the amount of information of our result set. Because if you count the amount of cells that a result set has, you can see that here we have 400 cells. We have 4 columns times 100 rows, so that is 400 cells. And if we count these ones, you are going to see that we have 5. So in total, we have 405 cells. And if we come here and we run this query, you are going to see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns and 100 rows, which means that this result set has 800 cells, which means that this single query version has more data in it than this query splitting version of our query that we have here. Hence, this is more efficient in terms of size and in terms of processing efficiency for our application because there is less data. And not only that, if we come to this page in which they made this benchmark, they benchmarked a before splitting and an after splitting, and they saw improvements for the query when it was splitted. Now, of course, this is a case-by-case scenario, but as you can see here, sometimes there is improvement in CPU processing, duration, how many readings, and how many rows were reported back. Now, if query splitting is so good, should we always use it? The answer is no, because there is a problem, a potential problem with query splitting, and that is, what if after you run this query and just before you run this one, the data of the people table is updated? Then you may have some sort of discrepancy between the data of the two queries. And this is a problem that single query doesn't have, and single query doesn't have that problem because everything is in a single query. So there is no possibility of this problem occurring. But as you can see, if you want to avoid a Cartesian explosion, or you understand that this query is too slow and you benchmark and you see that indeed it is slow and this one is better and this one, these two are better, then you can certainly apply query splitting. Now, what if you don't want to apply query splitting in a case-by-case scenario? What if you want to apply query splitting in all of the queries of your application? You can do that. Let me delete this and let's come here to our application DB context, and in the useSQL server I can add a second parameter that are some options, and in these options I can say use query splitting behavior, and I can pass this and say either single query or a split query. So this configuration that we're adding here will apply to all of the queries of my application. And not only that, I can now apply single query mode in a case-by-case scenario. So I can come here and let's say that I want to use single query here. I can say as single query, and that's it. Now this query will use the single query mode instead of the default query splitting mode that we just configured right here. If you like this video, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and let me know what you want me to cover next. Thanks!